All right, hello, and welcome back to the Basic Bible Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Thompson, and we are back from a very long hiatus that involved me in the hospital most of the summer. This is not how I intended to spend my summer at all, but the Lord had different plans, and so I'm back on the mend. I'm back home, and after about a month or so in a wheelchair, I'm finally up on my feet, and I got a good report from the doctor today. So how do we celebrate? By recording another podcast, which we haven't done in quite some time. So I'm excited back. And joining us today for the first time ever in the history of mankind, Pastor Chris Eldridge. Pastor Chris, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I have no idea why I haven't invited you up until now.
I've been thinking the same thing. It's just gnawing at me.
Well, now that you're breaking the ice here, we got to have you back. Right. Sure. Assuming you don't completely blow this one right here.
The bar is set high, so we'll see how I do.
So this is the grand audition. And if this is completely terrible, no one will ever know because I won't put it on air. Exactly. But anyway, I am at home. If you're not that anyone's going to be watching this because this is all audio, but which is good because Pastor Chris,
I'm ugly.
Yeah, you're not the greatest looking guy in the world, and neither am I. But
I have a face for audio podcasts.
Yeah. So, Pastor Chris, first tell us a little bit about yourself. Kind of introduce yourself to our audience. I know you a little bit. Sure. You pastor Cornerstone Church here in Beloit. But tell us about Pastor Chris Eldridge.
Sure, yeah. So my wife is named Spring, and we've been pastoring the church here in Beloit for about 7 years now, even though we've been connected to the church in some way, shape, or form in ministry for 22 years. We have 4 kids. I say kids. Our oldest 2 are our girls that are 21 and 20. We've got a 16-year-old young man who attends Hononegah High School and plays football and volleyball for them. And then I've got a 9-year-old, Colton, who is at the elementary school in Rockton, Illinois. So we live in Illinois. We pastor in Beloit, the best of both worlds. And so I'm
just surprised you're willing to say that you live in Illinois. That's really wow. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I can confess our sins to our brothers. Right?
Yeah. But you're not a Bears fan, are you?
It depends on who your demographic and audience is. I don't want this to go the wrong way, but yeah, definitely I am.
Wow, and you're a Christian too. That's really weird.
Yes. And I'm a pastor that's allergic to chicken, and then it almost cost me my credentials. So a lot of weird things going on here.
You're allergic to chicken.
Yeah, all poultry, anything with wings and beaks.
So you can't even
the gospel bird.
You can't even eat at the Lord's chicken.
I can't even take the sacrament at Chick-fil-A. No, I cannot.
Wow.
No, I can take of the drink, the lemonade and sweet tea, but I cannot. I cannot take of the bird.
How did you ever pass ordination with all of
this? That's what I'm saying. It almost cost me my credential.
All right. Well, let's jump into our topic today. Sure. And our topic, we're talking about the movie, The Sound of Freedom. I've seen this movie twice now. And the first time, there'd been a lot of buzz about it. It was making some money, making some headlines. I was a little skeptical at first because I'd heard rumors of connections to conspiracy theories like QAnon and things like that. And so, I wasn't, but I decided there was when you're in a wheelchair, there's not a whole lot you can do. But I can sit and watch a movie.
Right.
And so I grabbed my son, Tony, who has his learner's permit, and he's willing to drive anywhere at this point. And so I said, hey, I need to get out of this house. I've been in this house for a month. I need to go experience something other than the 4 walls here. So we went to another place with 4 walls. But this place has good popcorn and drinks and stuff. So I said, let's go see this movie. So I brought him along with me, and I was blown away. There's some movies that they just in my mind don't live up to the hype. In my opinion, this one did. So, Pastor Chris, you've seen the movie, and that's why at least I hope you've seen the movie. Otherwise, this is going to be really, really short.
Yeah. Oh, I should go see it. Thanks for the recommendation.
So, what were your impressions of the movie?
Well, I was kind of the exact opposite. So I came at it from the opposite perspective, in that I hadn't heard anything about it. My wife had actually heard about it. I hadn't heard the good, the bad, or the ugly about it. So I was coming in pretty fresh, pretty clean. And she had heard about it, heard good things about it. Spring is not one to want to watch movies of content when children are vulnerable, anything like that. And so the fact that she even wanted to see this, it really does bother her. There is some, residual issues that she has, as she contemplates and thinks about, our kids and all that kind of stuff. It brings a lot of anxiety to her. So the fact that she wanted to see it really spoke to me, about what she had heard about it. And so we went, and I went with a clean slate, an open kind of filter. And I absolutely, so as far as the movie goes, it's riveting. It's unbelievable. The content is, and again, not even knowing, I'll just kind of expose my ignorance here. Didn't even know until we were sitting there that it was a true story. I knew what it was about. The only kind of frame of reference that I had in my mind, going in, was another movie that had come out several years ago, that I think the brothers of For King and Country had done about trafficking. And it wasn't a true story. It was just exposing plots and exposing that type of dynamic in the world. And I thought this was just another one of those type, a real riveting, but modern day look at a very, desperate situation that people can find themselves in, having no idea that it was true. So as this movie unfolded, as I understood, as I started to pick up on, exactly what was happening and the reference points of the movies, it actually just became so almost overwhelming, in that it's a hard truth that needs to be known. And it became this thing where Spring and I both, when we would be asked about the movie, because we saw it very early on. So as we saw it, many people were still contemplating whether they would go see it or not, hearing about it. And so we would get asked a lot. And every question was, is it good? Because that's how you rate movies. Is it a good one? Is it a bad one? Is it boring? Is it long? Is it short? But the question that always came up is, was it good? And you can't answer that really without a discussion. It's unbelievably good and unbelievably horrific at the same time. And you walk away wishing you had never seen it, but so thankful that you had the privilege to see it, and burdened now with this unbelievable weight of, now what do I do with it? Oh, and so obviously, for those that have seen the movie, they give you plenty of opportunities on the back end of this movie to do something with it, not about it, not for it, but with it. What are you going to do with it? Armed with the knowledge, armed with the obligation, really, as far as what I consider a believer's obligation is, to actually do something with it. And so it was a very mixed bag. You walk away with this kind of mixture of emotions that, this was horrific. I don't want my children to see this, but man, my kids have got to see this. And we have to make this thing known. And so going in kind of eyes wide shut and having them open. Now on the back end of that, coming back and being such a fan And so now I'm Googling everything about it, and
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
reading up on all of this stuff, and I'm informing myself, and I'm talking to people about it, and I'm entering in or even instigating conversations about it. And all of a sudden you're hearing all of this negative backlash, and you're hearing all of the things that you were
Yep.
able to go in knowing. That was quite a different experience for me. But going into the movie, experiencing the movie, obviously, when I'm a geek, I'm kind of a comic nerd, so I'm used to these $300 million budgets, movies, all
Yeah.
this stuff. To go into a $15 million budget, which is, as some have said, that's pocket change for some of these directors
Right.
and producers, and especially these big Hollywood production companies. To be riveted from beginning to end, to be engaged, and the quality of the movie itself
Right.
was unbelievable. The acting obviously was great. These kids even did a great job. How I believe, looking down the annals of time and future, these kids will have been a part of something huge.
Yeah.
I pray. And so yeah, walking away, the experience was amazing, even though it was kind of a double-edged sword. And then you enter into the conversation of it.
Right.
And for those listening, I use air quotes just so you.
Yeah. It's really when I first heard about this, I thought it was a Christian movie, and it's not in not in the sense that it's has a blatantly gospel message, or there's one passage of scripture referenced in Matthew about the millstone around your neck if you harm a child. Outside of that, it's not, there's not a sermon in this, which is good because I don't know what your thoughts are, Pastor Chris, but most Christian movies I see, blatantly Christian movies, are just not good.
Right.
The production style is terrible. The acting is terrible. The script is contrived, and so I wasn't sure what to think before coming into it. And then again, all of the criticisms I heard. But you walk away from this thinking, just wow, I like how you put it. It's a good movie, but it's a horrible movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things, almost like I'm thinking about um, William Wilberforce and slavery, when he was confronting some of his fellow lawmakers. He was showing them the horrors of slavery and said, at the very least, you can't now be ignorant. You can't not unsee this.
Right.
And so, if you had asked me about sex trafficking or human trafficking before, I acknowledge that it's a real thing. It's a real problem. But the thing about this movie is it grabs your attention, and it eats away at your conscience and just alerts you to this. This is real. This isn't just something that's out there. Even though in the movie, this takes place in Colombia, most of the movie. But this affects children in the US, children everywhere, and it opens your eyes to a problem you didn't see. In a way, movies can communicate things in a way that reading a book or listening to a lecture or watching even a news report just can't capture. But that's kind of what the actor Jim Caviezel was saying at the very end. By the way, if you've seen the movie, stick around through the credits. Because at the end, there's a little special message, so don't just get up and walk out. I the only reason I didn't get up and walk out like I normally would during a normal movie, I was in the wheelchair and I was waiting for someone to help me. But I was glad I stayed to hear that, because I think he's right. And so, all right, so let's back up for those of you who don't know what we're talking about. Sound of Freedom is based on the true story of Tim Ballard, who was an agent with Homeland Security, and he was tasked, among others, with capturing these child predators, capturing these pedophiles who were going out and doing these horrible things until he was confronted with the idea of that you're catching the perpetrators, but what are you doing for the victims? And that shook him to the point where he had to act. He jumped in, and at first in the movie, I've done a little bit of research because there's nothing I take more seriously than this podcast and all the show prep that goes into it, days and weeks. Anyway, meaning I read an article. But yeah, so there are these two brother and sister, this couple that were kind of split up, and he's basically chasing after them, trying to find them. Although in real life, I guess it was just one child that still hasn't been found. But anyway, so he's searching for these, and it just alerts him to just the innocence of these children. And so that's what the story's about. Eventually, he goes out and he is the founder of the organization, the Underground Railroad, or the man, I'm drawing a blank for some reason. I'm going to edit this part out because oh yeah, Operation Underground Railroad. Wow, how did I forget that? All right, so anyway, Operation Underground Railroad, which goes out and again tries to save these children. And it's just, I don't want to give away too much because I want you to go and see this, even though, yes. So obviously and I try to tell this to everybody because I'm a history guy. I have a history degree. I teach history. And so whenever you see a movie that's based on a true story, there's a reason why it says based on a true story. It's not going to be exactly the same. You can't fit years and years of stuff into a nice hour and a half or 2 hour movie. So obviously there's some things that are a little different. But this is, I think, remarkably accurate for the most part. And it leaves you stunned. And it leaves you heavy because yes, you feel like we need to do something. Like, so I brought my son Tony. Tony's 15, about to turn 16 in about 2 weeks. So make sure you get something for Tony. And so he went with me, and I was a little unsure if I should bring him or not. But I thought, Tony's a mature guy. I think he can handle it. And it was funny. The next day, we were at a basketball tournament that Tony was playing in. And as we were there, he starts looking around. And he's like, Dad, I can't believe these parents are just letting their kids run wild. And this movie impacted him. So, Pastor Chris, I want to ask you from a pastoral perspective. You're not just a believer; you're a pastor, holy reverend, but you're a pastor, and God has given you a flock to take care of. And so, when you watch this movie, how do you view this what do you take away from a pastoral perspective?
Well, really, honestly, the biggest thing that I took away, and probably couldn't even articulate all the different things that just innately hit you. And from a pastoral perspective, you're always looking for pastoral fodder. You're always looking for hooks for sermons and all that kind of stuff. Kind of like a comedian, really. Honestly, always looking for those things that don't make sense. And
that's great because every chapel message I thought was a joke that you've ever preached.
True. See, very, very. The correlation is uncanny. No, the biggest thing that I took away from it is exactly what you said earlier, in that this was not a Christian film.
Yeah.
It was a film by a lot of Christians,
right.
But it wasn't for Christian distribution. And I'm like you in that most overt Christian films, God bless them, and some of them are tolerable, and some of them I would dare say are good. But most of them, I think they come at it A, from a smaller budget, and B, so defensively. They're always on the defensive. making sure we can't go this far, what's going to be misconstrued. We don't want to give headlines to, critics and all that kind of stuff. So it's tough to do. This movie was not like that. And what I love about it from a pastoral perspective, the greatest lessons that you can teach disciples or the people that you're in your congregations or those that you're trying to reach, the greatest lessons, they're not always very clean. And I don't mean clean as in vulgar and all that kind of stuff, but the whitewashed, prim and proper, perfectly edited sermon with 3 points in a poem, that's always not what reaches. It's the down and dirty where individuals that are lost and undone and hopeless and disgusted and ashamed of themselves and all that kind of stuff, they have to know that there's hope. And this movie doesn't provide a sermon, but it provides hope in that this is a real world situation, real world circumstance that a lot of people are dealing with. One of the things that impacted me as a parent, that I thought they did extremely well. And again, spoiler alert, but they begin and end in the context of this young girl's bed, her bedroom. There was, toys there. This was a real person in context of this movie, where we see, commercials of just or articles about random names, a random minor of a certain age. We don't have any context to that. It's not like our kid, but I immediately saw my son's room. It was cleaner than my son's room, but I immediately see the bed he sleeps in, and what it would feel like, and this concept kind of reverberates through the movie of what if that bed was empty tonight? What if that bed was unoccupied because of something like this? I think those are the messages from a pastoral perspective that mean the most and hit the most, because you don't have to be a believer. This didn't get so moral or so righteous that it verged on Christianity. It proves that Christianity is based and is the basis of morality.
Right.
And so it's not that they did a really, really close version of a Christian movie. It's that they were so transparent and engaged in the struggle of righteousness that it automatically displays and reflects what we believe, comes from the Bible, the Judeo-Christian morality mindset. And so from a pastoral perspective, it took me back to a parable. Like you said, every event wasn't historically perfectly articulated and accurate to what actually happened. But Jesus didn't care about that, because, the prodigal son didn't exist either. And yet millions of, upon millions of people have studied and found themselves in the middle of that same story, even though the historical accuracy, Jesus was very clear. I'm just using this to prove a point. There was really no religious connotation to the prodigal son, except for what we believe we can extrapolate from it. And this movie, from a pastoral perspective, fits that bill. It's perfect in that without overt Christianity, it's an unbelievable story for us to extrapolate Christianity and our obligation as Christians.
You can't walk away from this without a sense of moral outrage. And that proves that there is a morality.
Absolutely.
And again, to get into deeper epistemology, things like that, but that comes from somewhere. We all have a conscience. And the Bible says that even the law of God is written on the heart of man in Romans 1 and in other places. There are things that shock us, and all of us, whether you are atheist, Christian, Jewish, whatever, and no matter what part of the world that you're in, everyone can look at this movie and say, that was terrible. And again, based on a true story, this happens, and this does outrage us, and there's a reason for that.
Right.
One of the things I hope this movie does, and I think it's already doing, like when we adopted our children from foster care, and in that process, we were kind of made aware of a world that we didn't know existed, that literally lived across the street. world of drugs and extreme poverty and things like that really have been all around us all the entire time. We just never noticed it. And I'm hoping this movie does that with the problem of human trafficking and sex trafficking. This is a reality. This isn't just a QAnon controversy or conspiracy theory. I hate conspiracy. You guys know I hate conspiracy theories. I don't buy into any of that stuff. I'm skeptical, but I'm one of the ones that thinks that probably Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. I'm weird, but you don't have to be a QAnon shaman or whatever, a January 6th rioter to acknowledge the fact that this happens. And I think that sometimes that's a tool that people use to close their eyes to a serious problem. If I don't see it, I don't have that weight upon me, and I don't have to do anything.
One thing I didn't know about going into the movie was actually that that this movie, the showrunner, the script, everything was written 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Before anybody even knew what QAnon was,
right?
Or before there was even a QAnon, whatever it is. And so, the correlations between the two are just, it was done, edited. The release date was what they battled with so much, and so this would have been out way before all of that was even a thing. So it goes to show exactly what you're saying.
Well, in fact,
that it's just excuses to try to shield the world from seeing it.
In fact, in this movie, the U.S. government is looked at positively.
Yeah.
Department of Homeland Security was a help in this. You don't get this battle between the government, and there's not talking about secret politicians doing things in a pizza shop in New York or whatever. Right. None of that stuff is a part of this movie. So one last thing, we are running out of time, but I kind of want to squeeze this in because I think there's a practical thing that we can all do and we can all address. When it comes to sex trafficking, one of the things that's uncomfortable to talk about, and I want to bring up here because we talk about uncomfortable things, is the idea of pornography. Mm-hmm. There is a connection between pornography, between porn and the sex trafficking world. And I'll have some articles that'll link into that. But Pastor, I don't think we fully understand the destruction that pornography has upon the soul. It's this idea, most pornography, it's violent, and it's a unseemly type of thing. And that feeds into, I was just reading articles about how oftentimes some of these pedophiles will use pornography to desensitize their victims before anything physical happens. And even just pornography feeds into that desire. People who watch pornography, statistics show, are more likely to engage in dangerous sexual activities and even illegal sexual. And so this huge, massive push on pornography feeds into all of this. In fact, I was reading one statistic that maybe if I can find the exact statistic, because it was just overwhelming to me to think. Yeah, here it is. So pornography sites per minute receive 134,000 hits per minute. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So Pastor, how am I overblowing this, or am I just being one of those stuck up Christians that wants to control people sexually, or is this a real problem?
No, unfortunately for most men, especially, but not just exclusive to men, as we find out in the church a lot, as individuals, marriages, relationships are breaking down, and we start getting to the meat of it. This is not exclusively a male problem, though males are definitely more visual and tangible learners and experiencers. So it is definitely a perfect tool of the enemy, to speak pastorally. that attacks men. But I guess I would look at it in today's culture. I think the number one issue that I see, that I counsel, and most of the time, unfortunately, it's already gotten so bad because nobody thinks it's a problem until it's a problem.
Yeah.
And so it's already, by the time we're engaging with somebody that is suffering from the collateral damage of because the damage is not just straightforward in their sexual experiences or in their relationships, their marriages, but the collateral damage is extraordinary.
Yeah.
The concussion footprint of a bomb like pornography is huge. And but the biggest issue that I see that we deal with, and now there's a kind of a dumbbell effect, kind of a horseshoe effect that I'm seeing personally as we're going through this, is number one, you use the word desensitize. The problem with pornography is that, especially a male, gets desensitized to it.
Yeah.
And what happens is you need more taboo, you need more severe type of content to reach the same type. It's like drugs, in that when you gain a threshold that you can handle, and that you can metabolize out of your system, you need more of a hit to gain the same high that you were getting with just simple things. I mean, the simple example that I give is guys my age, and even older. We look back at the Sears catalog, that you get in the mail.
That's right.
You steal it from your mom to go look at some advertisements and all that kind of stuff. Now these kids, 13, 12, 11, even down into 10, 9, they're getting on their phones, on the devices that their parents are allowing them to be on unsupervised. It's not a Sears catalog or a Victoria's Secret or even, a swimsuit issue that some of us in our teens and younger, they're getting exposed to very hardcore stuff. And the more they get exposed to it, the more desensitized they get. So then they have to find the angles, the content, the taboo that's going to excite them in the way that a simple exposure did before.
Yeah.
And so that's desensitizing an entire generation to need a more, and exactly what you said, the more violent, the more invasive, the more taboo, relationally taboo, whatever is more of the risk, that's where they're going to navigate to get the same type of high from that they used to get from just basic whatever they were finding.
Right.
As that happens, as they get older, they get exposed to more stuff. These types of things start creeping in, and it's exactly what you said. Now all of a sudden, they are willing to now engage.
Yeah.
They are willing to now experience, because they've become so desensitized to just the exposure that the actual living out and sometimes the experiential side of this takes the effect. But the dumbbell, the horseshoe side of it, is that I think on the other end of it, as a society, we are intentionally now decreasing the taboo of some of these things.
Right.
Where, at one point, we would use terms like pedophile or pervert or groomer. And now you're hearing words thrown around like a MAP, which is a minor attractive person. It's just something that they have to deal with. It's something they were born with, or it's something in the chemical makeup of them that they're having to deal with. But basically, like a don't hold it against them, protected class of people that we're starting to see now. Not, we don't have any policies like that yet, but everything started with these small movements of desensitizing and destigmatizing some of these extremely taboo behaviors. So you have the exposure that's desensitizing a generation, and even guys our age and older, whoever is, no matter who you are, when you're watching it, you're getting desensitized to it.
Yeah.
Every exposure. So you're going to have to go down deeper the rabbit hole.
Right.
But then all of a sudden you got the society on the other end coming in and almost giving a pass to some of these. And that's the dangerous combination that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And what I'm struggling with, especially in counseling some of these guys that are, I've never, I mean, total transparency, I've never had to counsel through or navigate a pedophile, somebody who has done this.
Yeah.
But I have had to counsel those that have suffered from it, the victim.
Right.
We had in our Bible study just 2 weeks ago, and I know time is running short, but I could not believe this. An 80-year-old woman that has been a part of this church for 35 years was in one of our Bible study. We have a Bible study for retired people on Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock. And for the first time in her life, she shared with that group that she was a victim of her stepfather when she was 8 years old. First time in her life, 72 years of living with that. And then last week, the week of, that was Thursday, on Monday, we go to our summer camp, our church's, our denomination summer camp. And I have an 11-year-old tell me the same thing.
That's amazing. Well, we've got to stop there because we're about to run out of time here, and we're going to be cut off here. But I want to thank you all for listening, Pastor Chris. I hope you'll come back on the podcast. You passed the audition.
Thanks.
But our recommended resource this week, of course, is the movie The Sound of Freedom. We'll have a whole bunch of links in our show notes. And join us back next week. We'll have my former student Daniel Leach back on. He'll be giving us an update what's going on in his life. And so thank you for listening and have a great rest of your week.